Hey guys, Yxlarb here, and welcome back to my Forza Motorsport 6 series. It's Monday again, and I know you guys think Mondays normally suck, but since this series is going on in this day, then there's no problems anymore. No problems in the world. Plus, for me, it's still spring break when I'm recording this, so it's definitely not a problem. Anyway, as you can see here, we got the 2013, I believe, Clio RS200, whatever, Renault. I'm not a big fan of most French cars. I actually know the least about them than any other car in the world. But I actually spent this last summer in Bosnia and, just Europe in general. And you see a lot of these and Citroens and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow. It's so weird. You see them almost as often as you would see Hondas here in the US. It's just freaky. You know, it's like living in a totally different world. But anyway, it's not too modified. It's lowered. It's got, I believe, race brakes and then some cool wheels. Can't remember what they're called, but they're one of the few wheels that can go pure white like that. And if you saw my car, you would know I love white wheels. I've had 2 sets of white wheels on there now. Anyway, we're doing something special with this thing today. Let's just look at it more while I'm talking about it. This is the front-wheel drive version of the car. And this car isn't the only car that can do this, but it just happens to be the first car I unlocked that can do this. It can be converted to rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. It can be converted to all 3 types of drive for a car that has 4 wheels. So it's perfect for what we're doing today. We're going to be comparing front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive to all-wheel drive on the same car, and all 3 versions are on the same level. So they're all going to be Ds at 400. Very simple, right? Alright, so this is basically how we're going to be doing this. First of all, we're going to go to the test track of this giant airfield. I personally like this track, but it's not, from what I can see so far in the future, it's not going to be too useful to anything that I'm doing. So I figured, hey, let's give it some love for the early videos, and then, not worry about it later on, because I don't see it making too many more appearances. Here's my setup, just so you guys know exactly what's going on. All 3 versions of the car are going to have the same discipline, and no problems. But yeah, there we go. We're a D400, just like I said. And we're just going to go in there, and I'm actually going to be doing hot laps in all 3 versions, but we're going to be doing something different with each car first. So let's do that. And here we are with the 2013 Renault Clio front-wheel drive version, which is what it starts with, so I figured it made the most sense to go to this one first. Let's rev it out a little bit. Sounds pretty solid. I mean, it does have a few power upgrades, but nothing really crazy. So, I mean, it has exhaust and all that. That's why it sounds so good. I actually don't know what it sounds like stock. I modified it immediately. But anyway, front-wheel drive. We're going to be talking about this car specifically, but a lot of the things I say will apply to most cars that you convert to rear-wheel or all-wheel drive from front-wheel drive. It's going to be the lightest version as a front-wheel drive car. That's important to take into account. The start, obviously, if you have more power, like this one does, it doesn't have too much more power, but it does have more power. It will spin, as you saw, which is a downside. Now, obviously, during most races where it's more than 1 lap, that won't matter too much because you can just make up for it. But assuming it is just 1 lap, you will have a disadvantage there. Now, understeer is the next biggest thing. Now, I'm sure a lot of you drive front-wheel drives in real life. Here we are with the understeer. It kind of sends you outward when you apply too much power. And getting it under control is as easy as, tapping the brakes or letting off the gas or anything like that, or having better tires. That's another thing I should say. None of these cars have any tire modifications. They are the stock width and the stock compound. So tires are obviously very important when it comes to picking your drive. So I figured let's keep all the tires consistent, so that because this car starts at, I believe, 366, and I had to upgrade it to 400. If I upgraded the tires on one and didn't on the other, it could have totally affected the result. So I decided to keep them the same. But yeah, I mean, understeer you can totally keep under control. In fact, it can help you out sometimes. And I honestly think it's easier to control than oversteer is. Obviously, it depends on the weight ratio in the car, because if you have a more ideal weight ratio, you can control the understeer a lot better. But if it's really long wheelbase and not enough power, you could see how it wouldn't work out so well. So that's the front wheel drive. Now we're gonna move on to the rear wheel drive. So here we are on the upgrade menu. Now this is a good time to show off this feature. If you go to your setup manager, you can load and save setups. So here's my tunes. So it's labeled all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, front-wheel drive. Now you can see they're all at 400. They all have different power and different weight. And obviously we're going to be going over each of them. But as you can see, the front-wheel drive has a 61% of its weight up front, which is what I said. Now we're going to be going to the rear-wheel drive. Obviously you saw all the stats there. I can show them to you one more time just so you can look at them side by side and really know the differences, on paper at least. Obviously the application is going to be a little bit different. I don't always trust the paper. Man, that took a long ass time to load. Fuck. Yeah, you got recommended tunes which you can get from other people, which I don't give a shit about because all I care about is my stuff. So there you go. You can look at all three right there and pause the video if you need to look at them. But anyway, we're just going to take this thing to the track. Now here we are on the rear wheel drive version. To start out, weight distribution will change, obviously, because now your drive components are in the rear and your engine's still in the front. This is the best weight distribution you're going to get. I believe this one's at 54%. Obviously, with some modifications, you can make that better or worse. That's not what we're doing here. We're just driving it like normal with a few engine modifications. Now, like I said, this is the base distribution you're going to get of just the three drives, assuming they're all the same level. Now see what we're having here? This is oversteer. Now it's not the easiest to control in this car, as you can see. Oh, let's not crash. Fuck. Back to it. So anyway, you can do this in a rear wheel drive, which is fun. You can drift in a rear wheel drive. Much more ideal for it. You can apply the rules of drift to a rear wheel drive because that's just what rear wheel drives are made for. Now oversteer isn't all that hard to deal with. In this car it's not ideal because it has a really short wheelbase. It's kind of like drifting a go-kart, really, if you've ever tried that. It's fun, but it's easy to spin out. Now, we don't have too much power in this thing. We only have, like, what, 220, something like that? Because converting it to rear-wheel drive actually lowers your ranking. It lowered it from, what, like 400 to 380, so I had to compensate with a little bit more power to make it even with the front-wheel drive. And, honestly, Forza's ranking system isn't perfect. I mean, you can take 600s and beat 650s if you have the right kind of car. So it's not perfect, but I think it's the best it has ever been in this game. So, yeah. And I'm just having fun here. Don't worry about me. During the hot lap, I'm going to take things much more seriously. Now, obviously, our start still has wheel spin. You could argue more or less. I obviously haven't timed how long the wheels spin for in front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive, but yeah, you saw it. If you guys really wanted to time it, you could. So now instead of dealing with understeer, you're dealing with oversteer, and you've got more weight, but you've got a better weight distribution. So you really have to think about it that way. By the way, this thing is turboed, and trying to drift a car with turbo is not always the easiest thing. You always have to make sure you're on the throttle at least a little bit so you don't lose your compression. That lag can really kill you. I know. I actually not too long ago built a rear-wheel drive drift Evo 10, and yeah, that turbo just kills, man. It just kills. Alright, on to the all-wheel drive version. Obviously, I showed you how to get to the tunes from the upgrade shop because I was just in there. But you can just also click My Tunes here to go to the all-wheel drive version. Load that shit. I haven't mentioned it yet, but I won this car in like the level 2 or 3 driver level spin. And, like I said, I wasn't expecting to use something like this, but it looks really nice, so I decided to go with it. Now, in an all-wheel drive, there you go. Slight wheel spin, and then you're off. Now you are on your heaviest state here. Your rank goes way up. I mean, I was in the rear wheel drive, and I added it. It went from 400 to 440, so I had to tone it down a bit, bring the power down to near stock, and all that stuff. But you are your heaviest, and your weight distribution isn't as ideal as rear wheel drive is, because now you have more weight in the front again. However, you have more grip. As you saw there on the start, we have a much better start. I actually don't know if it was faster. It felt pretty slow, but that's just because if there's no wheel spin, it makes it feel as though it's slow. Just how if you have a slow car with loud exhaust, it sounds fast. And oh my god, I'm just wrecking this thing. To be fair, I guess I'm not really used to driving the all-wheel drive version. If I was doing the all-wheel drive version, I would apply more power. it's probably the safest one to apply more power to. The more power you apply to a front wheel drive, the more torque steer you'll get, which, you know, happens if you have the front wheels turning and applying power, which is a lot of work for them. It's a lot of pressure. And in a rear wheel drive, you'll probably be spinning out more. But in an all wheel drive, you have more grip and you'll be able to handle it. Now, in an all wheel drive, people will say you can drift it, but it's not technically called drifting. I don't actually know what the technical term is for it, but this, in an all wheel drive, it's fun to do. It definitely doesn't have as much control to it as rear wheel drive does, but you can do different kinds of tricks in it. So I mean, obviously for enthusiast levels like that, there's benefits to going rear wheel drive or all wheel drive, but I'm talking just in terms of track performance. By the way, I hope my drift counter isn't bothering you up there. I mean, if it is, let me know and I can turn it off, but for who knows when you're actually going to see this. I might do another 10 videos before you even see this video, so whatever you say might not even happen, right? Alright, now we're actually going to be doing the track. Now, to explain what's going to happen, I'm actually going to restart the race and just do a nice, simple test real fast, I guess. Test. That's what you want to call it. But we're just going to be going. Well, that wasn't a very good start. Don't worry about it. Now, when I'm doing the hot laps, this is how it's going to be. The route I'm taking is going to be the route that all three cars take. When I'm at the start line, I won't just go. I'm going to look for the ideal start. And of course, the timer doesn't start until you actually cross the finish line. So that won't be a problem. But I will always be going right here. I will be taking the entire right path. I won't be going over there. Won't be doing that. Going through the parking structure. I will always be turning right here. Going through this hangar. And then basically, the reason why I like this track is because you have options. I mean, if you just oversteered too far, or there were people in your way or something, you can go the left path, which is usually less crowded, but I believe it is slower. Obviously, it depends on what kind of car you're in, etc. But there we go. So basically, now you know the track, because the rest of the track doesn't have any options. It was just that first one. Yeah, I like the way this thing sounds. It's pretty clean looking overall. It's got a decent drop. I mean, it's the furthest you can go. That's one thing about this game, is that not too many of the cars can actually be dropped all that far, which is a shame, but, you know, it is what it is. Now, here's a warning before we start up. All three of the races will be played back to you guys in the replay cameras. You've seen me driving this thing around enough, as is, and I think the replay cameras just make it more cinematic. Maybe that's just me. Obviously, you guys can let me know if you like it that way. If you don't, I won't continue to do it like that. But yeah. Doing donuts in an all-wheel drive that doesn't have very much power is harder, by the way. Alright, starting off with the front-wheel drive 2013 Renault Clio. Here we are. Will it jump? Will it be going fast enough to jump? Oh, not really. Anyway, I can't get over how this thing looks. I think it looks gorgeous. I love the white wheels. I was debating black at first, but I'm kind of done with black. I've had too much black in my life. Okay, that sounds wrong. Too much of black wheels in my life. Too much of that on everyone's car. But anyway, right here, as you can see that by that tire streak, I was getting understeer. I was trying to keep my speed up, but the more I tried to do that, the more understeer I got. So I definitely had to tone it down a bit. That's a huge limitation of front-wheel drive. Your limit of grip just seems to be closer than the others, especially all-wheel drive, you know, because you have more grip. But anyway, this next turn coming up too, I actually end up sliding a little bit. It wasn't an ideal corner for this thing, that's for sure, especially with this little bump right here, right there. You just saw it. It definitely made me lose a little bit of grip. And the understeer was definitely evident here in this last corner. But the great thing about the front-wheel drive is since it's the lightest one, once it gets onto this straight towards the finish line, it has the advantage, the total advantage. It just goes on, goes on, goes on. And since it doesn't have too much less power than the rear-wheel drive, and it's considerably lighter, it definitely has the advantage there. Now in the rear-wheel drive. Now surprisingly, with the amount of power it has less wheel spin with the rear-wheel drive than the front-wheel drive. And I think that mostly has to do with the addition of the weight. But it's not a perfect weight distribution. I believe it's a 56% on the front right now. but it feels really good. It feels really balanced. Now in the longer sweepers like the one coming up, there definitely is some sliding, a little bit of oversteer, as you might see here. Yeah, there it is. Always at the same point too. I mean, if you go back in the front wheel drive one, always at the same place. Now here in particular, I definitely lose some grip. It doesn't look that bad in the replay, but probably for 3 or 4 seconds I didn't have it perfect. But the gear ratios change up, by the way, depending on what drivetrain you've got. So in rear wheel drive, my gears are a little bit shorter, and in all wheel drive they're a little bit longer. Now I wish I could explain the intricacies of all that to you, but I just don't have the time. The lap's not nearly long enough. And man, that was some oversteer for sure. This turn I had a lot of trouble with. My short wheelbase just did not let me get the grip that I wanted. It just kept on oversteering. Now here it doesn't have the same advantage the front wheel drive has due to the extra weight, but the all wheel drive is even heavier than that, so at least it has an advantage somewhere. Alright, the all wheel drive lap. As you can see, the least amount of wheel spin as per usual. The start didn't feel as quick though, probably because of all the extra weight. I don't remember exactly how much heavier it is. It might be 400 or 500. Don't quote me. I mean, obviously we'll take a look at it all after this, but let me tell you, these first 2 corners didn't feel nearly as good in the front wheel or rear wheel drive. I mean, this one just felt so much more controlled. I think I still, oh yeah, there it is, the same tire streak every time. But it felt really good. I mean, especially in corners like this, it just felt, it felt heavier for real. I mean, making those corners felt a little more tight. It didn't feel as lively as the front wheel drive did, but it definitely felt more controlled. Have a lot more grip at my disposal, obviously. These next 2 corners definitely exemplify that fact. I mean, I did slide a little bit here in this first one. See, a little bit, but not nearly as much as the rear wheel drive or front. And this corner felt the most controlled of them all. I mean, I was having a lot of trouble in the rear wheel drive, especially here. But here, we just go about it like it's nothing. And like they say on Top Gear, if you look like you're going slow around a corner, then you're probably going fast. But anyway, I'm really happy about this one. I particularly like driving this version of the car. All were fun though. Don't worry about that. Alright, now let's take a look at all 3 side by side. First of all, the front wheel drive. 207 horsepower, 186 pound-feet of torque, 2,448 pounds, and 61% of the weight on the front. The rear wheel drive has a little bit more power, more torque. In terms of weight, it's, what is that? 250 pounds more, almost. And it's a 54% weight ratio. Well, 54% on the front, 46 on the back. And all-wheel drive has an extra 2% on the front, which isn't too bad. It's still better than the front wheel. But it's almost at 2,800 pounds. That's like 350 more. So it wasn't as much as I thought initially, but that's quite a bit to add. I mean, that's, 2 regular-sized guys. But power is the lowest of them all, actually. I didn't even notice that. 203 horsepower, 182 pound-feet. But it does have that extra grip. So basically, you guys already know the times, but we're going to go over them here again. The front-wheel drive got 1 minute 19.14 seconds. 119.14. The rear-wheel drive got 1 minute 18.37 seconds. And the all-wheel drive got 1 minute 18.19 seconds. So as you can see, they're all relatively close to each other, especially the rear-wheel drive to the all-wheel drive. I mean, not even half a second separates them. I'm sure with a little bit of fine-tuning and better driving on my part, I could have gotten the rear-wheel drive there. But that's just another portion of this test, is the easeability of getting that consistently good time. I mean, with the rear-wheel drive and the front-wheel drive, I was all over the place. I mean, even after 4 or 5 races each, I was getting better, but it took a while to get there. Whereas the all-wheel drive, I was hitting 118s from the very first race. I was just all over that one. So there we go. Now, which one is better? I think it depends on what you're doing. I prefer front-wheel drives and front-wheel drive cars. That's just me. I mean, obviously, the tires are a big factor here. I left them stock width and stock compound. If we upgraded the tires, we might have seen completely different results. But who knows? That might be an experiment for another time. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Forza 6. I hope you meet with us again next Monday. And honestly, I don't know what's going to happen. I never know what's going to happen. that's part of the journey here, right? Now, before I go, I'm actually going to show off my garage. I always like to do this in my Forza videos because it might give you a clue as to what I'm doing next. You might see the cars and be like, oh, hey, maybe he'll deal with that car next. Who knows? Or I'll unlock more cars. Who really knows? For real. But I got this Audi e-tron, which is just amazing. My favorite prototype for real. And then we got the Bugatti still, of course. S2000 hasn't changed. I've been using this for the races, so for the story races to unlock things. So that's been the main goal. Obviously the Renault, but I've also got this Silica, which is just the world's ugliest Silica in my opinion. I mean, those wheels are just horrendous. Those headlights, like, what were they thinking? So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Forza Motorsport 6. I try to make them as entertaining as possible, especially since you're only getting one a week. And if our plan with Bosniancheese was implemented by now, you're only getting 3 of these a month. It's like, what? We're not getting enough of this. But I actually feel like it's plenty, because these videos take longer than the others do to create, and I am not full of millions of ideas, you know? I only have limited amounts. Plus, I have limited money on this account. I have what now, like 80, 90 grand? That's not really all that much, but like I said, I don't know what's going to happen next time, and neither do you. But who knows? Maybe you saw my garage earlier. Maybe you saw something like, hey, maybe he'll work with that car next. Anyway, that's the only hint I'm going to give you because I still don't know, really. Anyway, see you guys next time.